Welcome to Deep Dive. Today we're launching into a really critical look at the U.S. Visa Bulletin for November 2025. Now, this bulletin, it's way more than just a list of dates. It's essentially the official roadmap dictating how fast immigrant visas get processed for, well, everyone around the world.
Yeah,
If you're out there waiting for permanent residency, this bulletin pretty much defines your life's timeline.
exactly. And our mission today is to try and cut through some of that complexity. We need to look past just the raw numbers and really synthesize what this November 2025 data actually means, in practical terms, especially for applicants from those high-demand countries, India, China, Mexico, and the Philippines. We really want to get a clear picture of where the structural backlogs are most severe and, frankly, why the wait for some countries is years, while for others it's measured in decades.
And that understanding is just everything, isn't it? Knowing the difference between, say, a 5-year wait and a 15-year wait lets applicants make real decisions. Decisions about careers, education, family planning. This isn't just bureaucratic data. It's the foundation for setting realistic expectations. Okay, so let's start with the basics, the essential terms that really govern these timelines. If you're tracking your case, you're basically living by two key dates: the final action date and the date for filing. Can you maybe break down what separates these two?
Yeah, absolutely. And the distinction is crucial for any kind of strategic planning. The final action date, think of that as the finish line. That's the priority date an applicant needs to be earlier than to actually have a visa number ready for them, immediately available. It's only when your priority date clears that final action date that your case can be formally approved, the green card issued.
Okay, so final action date controls the actual visa getting handed out. What about the date for filing then?
Right, so the date for filing is an important earlier step. It's generally, let's say, more accommodating. It often allows eligible applicants to submit the necessary paperwork, specifically the adjustment of status, the AOS application, if they're already here in the U.S., sometimes significantly earlier than their final action date would allow.
So that sounds like a bit of a technical advantage.
It really is. Filing that adjustment of status application early gives you certain protections, certain benefits, even if the final visa number itself isn't ready for years, potentially. It basically allows the administrative clock to start ticking sooner.
And sometimes we see that letter C pop up in a category. What's the significance of that? That sounds like the ideal scenario.
C stands for current. Yes, that's what everyone hopes to see. When a category is marked current, it means there's virtually no backlog. All qualified applicants can just proceed quickly. It usually indicates that the demand in that specific category from that particular country is well within the annual limits.
But that point you just made, the annual limit, that's exactly why we're doing this deep dive, isn't it?
Yeah.
Can you tell us about the structural constraint, the thing that creates such a huge difference between the rest of the world and places like India and China?
Yeah, it really comes down to the per-country cap that's imposed by U.S. immigration law. See, regardless of how incredibly high the demand might be from one place, no single country can receive more than 7% of the total employment-based or family-based visas allocated globally each year. So when you have high-demand nations like India or China potentially providing, say, 50% or more of the applicants for a category, that 7% limit acts like a severe bottleneck. It forces applicants into these decades-long queues, completely separate from the line everyone else is in the rest of the world.
Okay, let's dive into the actual data now, starting with the family preference categories, F1 through F4. We can maybe start with one piece of good news at least.
We can, yes. The F2A category, that's for spouses and minor children of permanent residents. It's a major outlier right now. The bulletin shows F2A is current across the board. For all countries, India, China, Mexico, the Philippines, and the rest of the world. So that suggests immediate family unity is, generally speaking, prioritized.
Okay, that's definitely good to hear. But I suspect that relief might be short-lived when we look at the categories involving adult children and siblings. Let's take F4, the category for siblings of U.S. citizens. This seems to be where that idea of a decades-long queue becomes brutally real.
Oh, absolutely. The F4 category just perfectly illustrates the sheer magnitude of the historical backlog. For applicants from India, the final action date is still shared. Well, it's stuck way back at June 2006. Just to put that date in context for you, the U.S. citizen who filed that petition did it back when Facebook was still mostly for college kids, and the first iPhone hadn't even come out yet. We are literally talking about nearly 2 decades of a life basically put on hold.
That is genuinely shocking. Nearly 20 years. How does that compare to the other countries we're tracking? Because we can't just lump Mexico and the Philippines together as simply less backlogged, can we?
No, you're right. They show different pressures. Mexico, for instance, faces intense regional demand, right? So it often shows a much older, sort of more persistent backlog in F4. Their date might reach back to around 2000. It's technically an older date than India's, but because the annual demand shifts, how quickly their date moves can be quite different. For the Philippines, the date is often somewhere in between, maybe around 2004, give or take. But crucially, the rest of world category is significantly more recent, perhaps only looking at a 6 or 7 year delay, which sounds long, but compared to India.
A world of difference. What about F3? That's the married sons and daughters of U.S. citizens.
F3 shows similar constraints for India, though maybe slightly less extreme. The cutoff there is around February 2010, but still that's easily a 12 to 15 year wait. It just really highlights how quickly these preference categories can stagnate once that high demand slams into the 7% limit.
All right, now let's shift gears to where the competition often feels the most intense. The employment-based categories, EB1 through EB5. What are the major trends we're seeing here for skilled workers?
Well, the EB categories really illustrate that per-country cap acting as a major choke point for high-skilled talent. Let's start with EB2. This is for those with advanced degrees or exceptional ability. For India, this category is highly restricted. The cutoff date is hovering around March 2013. China is also significantly behind the rest of the world in EB2.
Okay, but sometimes we see something interesting where the EB3 category, that's skilled workers and professionals, is actually ahead of EB2 for India. That seems backwards, right? If EB2 is for higher skilled workers, why does that happen?
Yeah, that phenomenon, it's a direct result of demand cannibalization and some strategic visa management by the agencies. For India, the absolutely massive backlog in EB2 forces many people who are eligible for EB2 to actually downgrade their applications. They refile in the EB3 category. They're hoping it might move slightly faster because of specific annual visa allocations or maybe spillover rules between categories. So while EB3 India's date is slightly later, around September 2012, it really reflects this intense internal competition. Applicants are essentially jumping lines, trying to find any path that's shorter, which ironically causes stagnation across multiple categories at once.
Oh, wow. So the dates are showing the backlog is so deep, applicants are basically fighting over scraps in adjacent categories. What about the most elite category then? EB1 for priority workers, extraordinary ability, multinational managers. Surely that top tier is moving quickly.
You'd think so, but unfortunately, no, not for everyone. EB1 is actually backed up significantly for both India and China. India's date might be stalled around March 2021, maybe even earlier depending on the month, and China's is often several years prior to that. This, to me, is the most telling sign of the pressure. A category that should be moving quickly is years behind for these two specific nations.
And yet, in stunning contrast, EB1 for the rest of the world, and often for Mexico and the Philippines too, remains completely current. It really is a tale of two entirely different timelines.
It absolutely is. And just briefly on EB5, the investor category. That's typically current for the rest of the world, Mexico, Philippines. Though India does face a moderate backlog there, and China still sees a significantly earlier date, reflecting, years of high capital investment interest from Chinese nationals. So if we try to synthesize all this data, the undeniable truth, really, is that India faces the most acute, the most severe backlogs in the entire system. They often dominate the list of the most delayed categories in both family and employment contexts. China follows closely behind, particularly in the employment categories. Meanwhile, the rest of the world is essentially operating under a completely different, dramatically less restrictive system.
So if I'm an applicant looking at this bulletin in November 2025, what are maybe the three most critical things I need to take away, strategically speaking?
Okay, 3 key things. First and foremost, verify your country of chargeability. This is paramount. You absolutely must look at the specific chart for your country, whether it's Mexico, the Philippines, or any other nation, and never ever assume the India or China dates apply to you unless that's your chargeability.
Right. Critical first step. Secondly, you mentioned the dates can move backward. We need to address that fear of retrogression, right? That adds a huge amount of uncertainty.
Absolutely. Second point. Be vigilant about retrogression. It's a real possibility. Because visa availability is counted quarterly, sudden spikes in demand can actually cause the cutoff dates to move backward without much warning. This happens when the annual or quarterly quota gets used up faster than expected. It can throw careful planning into chaos, so always plan with some flexibility built in.
Okay, check chargeability, watch for retrogression. And finally, you mentioned leveraging that date for filing. What's the real practical benefit there, especially for people stuck in those really long queues?
Yes. The third point is utilizing the date for filing. If it's available for your category and country, use it. The ability to use that earlier date to submit your adjustment of status application is essential. It provides significant advantage. Things like work authorization, the EAD, travel authorization, advanced parole. But maybe more importantly, it locks in a legal status for the applicant and their immediate family while they wait. This is absolutely critical for just managing life, work, school, travel while waiting, potentially for years, for that final action date to become current.
And if we sort of zoom out and connect this back to the bigger picture, these dates, they aren't just frustrating for individuals, are they? They represent pretty massive economic and political challenges, too.
They really do. They starkly highlight the intense pressure that 7% per country limit puts specifically on high-skill migration. When your top-tier categories, EB1 to EB3, are moving at such an agonizingly slow pace for these high-demand nations, it actively, you could argue, disincentivizes top global talent from pursuing careers and building long-term futures in the U.S. This Visa Bulletin data isn't just numbers. It's a key data point in the discussion about global economic competitiveness. #outro.
So just to give a short brief of our discussion today, we've analyzed the November 2025 Visa Bulletin, and it really illustrates the dramatic, almost shocking differences in immigrant visa wait times. The main takeaway has to be the severe, multi-year, and often decade-long backlogs faced by applicants from India and China across almost all employment categories, and many family ones too. This situation is in sharp contrast to the rest of the world, which often enjoys current status or much, much shorter waits. It just underscores how vital it is for you to understand your specific country of chargeability and to proactively use those dates for filing whenever possible.
And perhaps, given these systemic, enduring constraints, especially in those critical employment categories for high-skilled workers from specific nations, here's a provocative thought for you to consider. How might this incredibly uneven distribution of visa availability actually accelerate the trend we're seeing of global talent actively seeking competitive pathways in other developed nations? And what could the long-term impact of that be on American innovation and competitiveness?
That wraps up our deep dive into the November 2025 Bulletin. All the best, and we will meet again with another important matter again.